TIFU by answering the door naked. When I was younger, I went out one night and got straight up blotto drunk. For background, in the house I lived in, my bedroom door opened up into the living room not far from the front door, which had a GLSS weather door. So when I'm laying in my bed, my head is near the outside wall, maybe 6 feet or less from the front door. So the next morning I came out of my unconscious stupor with my head pounding so hard I thought it was going to explode. Somebody was knocking on my door. All I could think of was, "Dear sweet Jesus, make it stop." So I jumped out of bed, rolled up and whipped the door open and basically said, "What?" It was a little boy and girl, and behind them were a couple of older men. Apparently it was Jehovah's Witnesses, and the uncles were taking the kids out to proselytize. I guess that's a thing with them. They were all staring at me with a look of shock and horror. That was when I realized I might have ucked up. I was buck-ass naked. TLDR/TIFU by getting really drunk, then answering the door naked when Jehovah's Witnesses knocked and brought their kids to proselytize. TIFU by telling my daughter I beat her. Daughter's daycare has circle time in the morning where they talk about their feelings. It came to my daughter's turn and she told the class she was sad when her daddy beat her. Her teachers were dumbfounded at first. Of course, this kind of thing is concerning for any daycare teacher. Her teachers and I have a good relationship, and they know that's not my style of parenting. I don't believe in spanking or anything like that. I racked my brain wondering where she would have heard something like this. Over the weekend we were racing up and down an aisle in Lowe's, and when I made it to the end before her I yelled, "I beat you." We laughed and I let her win the next few times, and I thought nothing of it. TLDR, TIFU by telling my daughter I beat her in a foot race at Lowe's, rolling on the floor laughing. TIFU by giving my wife a hall pass on vacation. This happened about a couple of months ago. My wife, Alyssa, 33F, and I, 35M, have been married for a few years and have known each other for 5 years. We have a great ex-life and, in general, are *actual people. We talk to each other about who we find attractive and are open about our prior ex-lives and body counts. Fast forward to us being on vacation in We were at the swim-up bar at the pool, and we're sitting next to a well-built guy from Serbia named Tomas, who was chatting with us and explained they came to this hotel every year for the last 7 years for 2 weeks a year, just to relieve stress from his job. He owned a couple of clinics. At one point in time, he left the pool and the end came back in, and my wife noticed the outline of his package, which appeared to be very large. She mentioned it to me and commented that he's a good-looking guy, and she wondered whether he knew how to sit. We were both drinking throughout the day and were definitely not sober, and I told her Thatch could go ask him. She asked me if I was seriously okay with her doing that, and I said, sure, why not? She went over to talk to him, and about 20 minutes later, Alyssa came back to me and told me that Tomas said that he would love to show her what he could do, if I was okay with it. I asked Alyssa if she wanted to, and she said, sort of, with an embarrassed smile. I told her that we only live once, and we were leaving the next day, so she should go enjoy herself. She asked me if I would, and I said I was, and off she went. I was very nervous and went to lay out near the pool, and about an hour later, she came back, looking slightly disheveled. We didn't really discuss it until later, but she told me that he really knew what he was doing and he was the biggest she's ever had, and that she needed to rest. She was so sore that we couldn't even have sex with her until we got home, because she was too tender. Now that we are back home, when we are at bars or restaurants, she has mentioned several times to Muin she sees attractive guys with bulges, and ASKSIF I think they would be bigger, better than Tomas. And I'm getting the feeling that she would want to find out. Don't know what my point here is. Just annoyed that I may have reignited her ex-drive from her single days, and don't know if I can deal with it. TLDR. Let my wife have X with some guy in vacation. She loved it and is now looking for more. Edit 1. Appreciate all of the positive comments and private messages. And sort of expected the negative comments. The ones say this is *allshit, and the kill yourself comments. It is Reddit. After. Let me clarify. Although I am uncomfortable with the possibility of her wanting to unleash her inner Lut, up until this point, we often commented to each other about the dicks or its or bodies of other people, whether it was on something we were watching or in real life. Yeah, maybe it's immature, but we discussed that openly, so it wasn't out of the norm. And as far implications, Tomas wore a condom when they were having sex.
TIFU asking my dad about the bruises on his face. A few nights ago I, 22M, had dinner at my parents' house. I noticed my dad had bruises on his face. The bruises kind of looked like burns. When I asked my dad what happened, my mom answered, She said cooking oil splattered on my dad's face when he was using the frying pan. I asked my dad what he was doing with the frying pan because I've literally never seen him cook anything in my life. My answered again. She said my dad was failing to follow an easy-to-follow recipe. I asked my dad what was going on in that frying pan for him to end up so crispy. My dad said nothing. He was in a mood. My mom joked about my dad cooking the flesh on his skin instead of the meat in the pan. I asked my dad if he was gonna allow mom to roast him like that. My dad finally opened his mouth and said he wasn't allowing my mom to do anything to him. My mom suddenly said my dad's name in her serious voice. My dad said if he had to choose between the frying pan and my mom using candle wax during X without wearing her contacts, he would have gone with the frying pan. My mom shushed my dad, but he refused to shut up. My dad said he was sick of the frying pan story because it made him look like the dumb husband. My mom encouraged me to ignore my dad and finish my food, which prompted my dad to tell my mom to stop babying me and to start treating me like an adult, whose parents were honest at all times. I begged them not to be honest at all. My dad said the frying pan accident was a story my mom fabricated, because she didn't want anyone to know that she was too blind to recognize the difference between his face and his chest when she dripped candle wax all over him in bed. I tapped out and said too much information. My dad shrugged and said I asked. I was unable to continue eating. My dad noticed and said if he could finish the job with burns on his face, then I could finish my meal. He winked at my mom when he said, finish the job. It was nightmare fuel. TL. Doctor noticed my dad had bruises on his face that looked like burns. Asked him what happened. Kind of expected a funny, family-friendly story since we were enjoying a family dinner. My dad said my mom dripped candle wax on him during X before he encouraged me to finish my food like he finished. Inside my mom.
TIFU by not realizing how hard it is for the average person to make money. I'm a minor, and for the past 2 to 3 years I've been playing guitar and ukulele. Of course, music is not the most cheapest hobby. It is expensive, even for a decent instrument. So, I'm a self-taught player and have only had like one formal lesson. And I cannot afford to do anything like maintain, change strings, or repair my guitar or ukulele at all unless it gets really, really bad. This was one of those moments. I have noticed that my ukulele strings were getting duller, and couldn't even stay in tune for less 2 songs. I decided to go to Guitar Center to have them restring my ukulele. My living situation is pretty messy since I don't live with my parents. They realize I just prefer not to stay with them for personal reasons, and instead I live with my grandmother and take care of her. I asked my grandmother for $30, since I talked to Guitar Center's people and they said around $25. I would bring $30 just in case. But my grandmother decided to just give me all her money, which was only $50. I was immediately shocked. Auntie tried to return it to her but she refused and just said to give her the change. My auntie picked me up, ready to go, and she asked me how I got the money and I told her. She was furious. She explained that my grandmother can't work, and she lives off of pension which is $400 per month. The rent is around $1. minus $2. And my auntie pays the rest while my grandmother pays what she can. I felt really guilty. I told my aunt that I didn't force anyone to give me money. And if they had said no, I wouldn't beg. She told me to just ask my mom next time, and I have, but my mom refuses to give me any money because she doesn't have any money, and refuses to pay anything for my music stuff in general. I offered to just not spend anything at center and just go back home, but my aunt told me to just go spend it and my mom would pay her back. I just know my mom would be outraged. Currently waiting for my cousins to finish their karate lesson, and afterwards will be on my way to Guitar Center. I'm planning on getting a job when I get older, that way I don't have to ask anyone. TLDR, because I didn't realize how tough my grandmother's financial situation is. I got in trouble for taking her money despite the fact that I didn't force her to and offered to not spend it all. TIFU by telling my partner about an STI after his condom slipped off. I think I act up a good thing. This happened about 3 hours ago. I've, F31, been seeing Simon, M31, for a little over a month. We've been taking things slow, partially because of living situations, so we'd only had X once before and, besides that one time, the rest of our dates have been in public. Today I finally got my place to myself and invited him over for dinner. We didn't even make it to dinner before we were in the bedroom going at it like orny teenagers. When all was said and done, we realized the condom had slipped off at some point and he'd finished inside me. A couple of weeks ago, I had a pap smear that came back abnormal. This meant my abusive ex had given me HPV and it may have caused cervical cancer. Have an appointment to have a colposcopy done to find out if it's cancer. I hadn't discussed this with Simon yet. I should have before we had X, and I know that I upped up. Simon was worrying about Plan B, but I knew I had to tell him about his exposure. I blurted it out and things changed drastically. He excused himself to the bathroom for a while. When he came back, started getting dressed. He gave me money for the Plan B and held me for a few minutes before leaving. Before he left, he said he needed to think things through because this was a big red flag, but if he expected openness from me. He felt like he should be honest about his own red flags. I feel terrible for not having told him beforehand. While he seemed to have taken it better than I deserve, I still feel ashamed and I don't know if he can forgive me. TLDR, I didn't tell my partner about having HPV until after the condom came off during X.